So we're going to talk about Hulkbuster, but first we have Sleeve It or Heave It, and this is a total surprise because Pat and I forgot to talk about this before he came onto the podcast. And I think the one that we should talk about is actually a favorite of ours. We talked about it a little bit on the Spider Foes, and that's Blind Obsession. So this
Ooh.
is a newer card. Was really popular. I feel like when it first came out, it's kind of fallen out of favor a little bit, and then I've seen kind of a resurgence in it later. So Blind Obsession is a card that gives one character two attack dice and two defense dice against a chosen character, but they lose two defense dice against everyone else. Right? That's a TLDR.
Mhm.
We don't read the whole card. So Pat, what do you think of Blind Obsession?
So I really, really like Blind Obsession, and one of my favorite episodes is if listeners want to go back into the archive, our Green Goblin box review episode where I talk about Blind Obsession at great detail, right? And I try and sell you on the card, and all of the cool situations you can be in to make Blind Obsession work. Um, Now, I kind of had, yeah, I when when it came out, I used it a little bit, and then over time, I found it dropped out of my rosters. But I've been bringing it back again, and I especially like it for damage-focused teams that have a lot of characters. I like it in Sin. I like it in Avengers. Um, I do think it has a place.
Yeah, I like it in Guardians a lot too.
Mm.
So initially I was using it on kind of like normally on like one of the flanks, you only have one character, and that's a fine way to utilize it. But the extra damage punch is often really relative, and the defense isn't nothing too. We stack it with the other things like bitter rivals and things like that. You're gonna end up with quite a big defensive swing off of it.
Oh yeah, especially if you have characters that get benefits from those extra dice, right? Offensively or defensively. If you're doing like reroll alls or you're counting blanks on defense or something, then those dice matter even more than they otherwise would. I think it's really nice with all of the characters that have rapid fire attacks, because making your default action go up to two 6 dice attacks is just really great. And it helps a lot of those characters to trigger those attacks as well. If they need the hit, it becomes incredibly reliable to get a hit with rapid fire on 6 dice.
I think the other important thing to mention with Blind Obsession is Blind Obsession, unlike Doom Prophecy, the negative does eventually leave. Correct?
Yeah, in the sense that either your character leaves or they do. The negative persists for as long as that state changes. But one of the use cases that I think happens a lot for Blind Obsession is you use it on your first activation of the round on a character who's already been injured and you just want to KO them first. And you just play Blind Obsession to be like, all right, I'm just using this for the damage boost for one round. My plan is to immediately KO you, and this is insurance that I do. And if it pays off, then I have no negative because the effect immediately goes away when you're removed from the table.
Interesting. See, I've found myself using it defensively a lot of times too. When you don't have
Mm.
priority because it's a reactive card, right? You can still use it at the start of the activation phase. I've used it when it's clear that they want to activate character A, and I really don't want them to kill character B. I've used it that way a couple
Yes.
times.
Yeah, that can work. I've even had some tricky situations where I've done things like played it on a character when I don't have priority to almost force my opponent's hand to have them activate and kill that character.
Hmm.
Right? Like I've done this with Doom Prophecy as well. Like poor Quicksilver keeps getting these cards played on him just so that Magneto doesn't get attacked. And it kind of works. And sometimes that's worth it, right? If you think of it like another version of something like Sacrifice, um, it can be correct to play it on someone just to force your opponent to take them out before they suffer the consequences.
Yeah, and basically you're saying if you don't take this character out, they're going to crack back with plus 2 dice on each one of their attacks.
Mhm.
Um, and
It just it turns them into the highest priority target that they need to deal with priority.
I'm not sure that's true when Magneto's on the table, but I understand the line at least.
Hmm.
So it sounds like we're
Yeah.
actually both pretty high on Blind Obsession, then, right, Pat?
Yeah, I like it a lot. I I find that it's often making it into my 8 if I have multiple characters who get good use out of it, like who have attacks with rapid fire or who have attacks with rerolls. And I especially like it in my 5 on crises where I expect the fighting to be a bit more spread out. Because the one time I don't love it is if I don't have priority, I have to put it on a character, and then my opponent has tons of choices about how they deal with that character. If everyone is in the middle of the central gamma shelter, putting it on one person is not that special. But when people are fighting on things like extremist consoles, you're much more likely to get use out of both parts of the card.
All right, so it sounds like we're both pretty high on Blind Obsession. I find it often makes my 8 or my 10 how often it
Yeah.
makes my five is a whole nother story. But I do think it's a good card, and if you haven't explored it, definitely check out Blind Obsession. And yeah, go back and listen to our initial Green Goblin review. It's a great, gorgeous art.
Mm. Very cool.